Welcome to Hockey Night in New York, where Islanders hockey is always top shelf. Whether you got your start as a Dynasty veteran, a Millbury survivor, or you were born into the Church of Trotz, Hockey Night in New York is your home for all things Isles. Now, here are your eclectic hosts, Sean Cuthbert and Christian Arnold.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Hockey Night in New York. Welcome to the program, everybody. It is Sunday, March 20th, 2022. Another fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Dave Pagnotta of the fourth period will be joining us to break down the trade deadline, what the Isles may or may not do. My name is Sean Cuthbert. With me 95% of the time is Mr. Christian Arnold. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing well, Shawnee. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm also doing well.
Good.
You have a good time at the Marriott on Thursday,
It was a great time. Hopefully everyone that came down enjoyed themselves and had a great time as well.
Had a blast. A lot of great people coming down there. Had a great crowd. Couldn't ask for a better result against the Strangers. Nice little 2-1 victory in their building. That's always nice.
Great performance out of Ilya Sorokin.
Oh, yeah.
Anders Lee and Kyle Palmieri get a pair of goals. So big night for the Islanders.
Yes, indeed, and a big night for Hockey Night in New York here. Like we said, trade deadline talk. We are on deadline eve. Tomorrow we find out if Lou gets up out of bed, makes any deals, or if he takes it easy, because I think it could go either way, but we're going to dive into it. But before we do, I want to remind you all that we are proud to be presented by R.J. Daniels American Bar and Grill, located at 279A Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center. It's the best place to catch the Isles when you can't be at the game. Head on down for great food and drink specials, plenty of HD TVs, and in-game sound. Also happy to be sponsored by Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, 217 Carlton Avenue in East Islip, and, of course, UBS Arena at Belmont. They're an official partner of the New York Islanders. Check out the menu at BlueLineDeli.com for all their great offerings. Also happy to be sponsored by Ty Technology, a voice-over IP company providing phone services for businesses across the country. If you're tired of dealing with long hold times and the impersonal service of companies like Spectrum, Optimum, and Verizon, give Ty Technology a call at 516-856-7800 for 3 free months of service. And, of course, thrilled to be sponsored by Oyster Bay Brewing Company, creator of the Barn Rockers Session Ale, available at 12 locations at the Islanders' brand new home in UBS Arena, and even more distributors across the country from coast to coast. You can also visit the tap room at 36 Audrey Avenue in Oyster Bay 7 days a week to sample all their fine offerings. And don't forget, folks, you can get 15% off at oysterbaybrewing.com by using promo code HNINY. And remember to get your questions in for Questions Brewing later on in the show. So, Christian, as we just discussed, had a great time Thursday, right? But crazy enough, we're doing a show a couple days later. The Islanders wedged 3 more games in.
They did.
This condensed schedule that they have due to all the games they missed in the beginning of the season, we got almost basically a full week's of games to talk about here. So you got the Rangers, you got Dallas yesterday, you got Philly today. Their winning streak comes to their point streak, I should say, comes to a close here, and a sleepy loss to the Philadelphia Flyers earlier this afternoon. Trade deadline's tomorrow. What do you say, CA?
Well, certainly a lot of movement already in the NHL world when it comes to the trades that have been going on. We've seen a lot of, Mark Giordano moved earlier today. Or was that yesterday? I can't keep it straight. It's all been happening so quickly.
It's true.
But I mean, at least it's an exciting sign maybe for tomorrow. I know usually these trade deadline days are extremely lackluster, and there's not a lot of pizzazz, and you end up spending 8 hours watching television until that 3 o'clock deadline, and then all of a sudden nothing has happened.
Right, the guys at TSN are just like, let's watch another highlight clip of this guy who's on the trading block right now.
They're trying to fill, I think they're on for like 12 hours that day or something like that.
It's a long haul. I mean, they love their hockey up there.
They do. And it's pretty cool now. You see ESPN carries part of that trade center coverage on the big network on ESPN2 usually, and then they stream it all day on their digital platform. But obviously you look at the Islanders play the last couple games, and in fairness, back-to-back nights, it's 3 games in 4 nights. It's a tough schedule. It's a tough stretch of games, and obviously, Cal Clutterbuck and Andy Green weren't out on the ice as well. I don't think that's a bad stretch.
Maintenance.
We'll get into that a little bit. I don't think that's a bad stretch. Again, we all know, we all kind of know where the season is headed, and that's certainly fine. And you look for the positives right now, that the momentum builders for next season. And I think the last 2 games, you could even say this game wasn't a terrible game. It wasn't a terribly exciting game either. It was a game. and it was played, and that's really all you can say about
That's
it.
how
And the
they
Islanders
happen
lost.
sometimes.
But, you look at the win on Thursday over the New York Rangers, Ilya Sorokin versus Igor Shesterkin, which was a tremendous goaltending battle. You have to admit, whether you love the Rangers, hate the Rangers, love the Islanders, hate the Islanders, that was a phenomenal goaltending duel. And that's something you hope to see for many, many years to come between those two Russian goaltenders who are now predicted to be the future stars in net for both of these organizations.
And we talked about exactly that with Dan Rosen when we did our pregame show on Thursday, talking about this budding rivalry between Shesterkin and Sorokin, not only countrymates but pals. I mean, they're good friends, so that's pretty cool. Crosstown rivals, and we got a real nice taste of what that might look like for years to come on Thursday night. Low-scoring 2-1 game. You obviously have that ridiculous save by Sorokin that was all over the place.
Yeah.
Very impressive. Basically doing the limbo, finding a way to block the puck from going in with his paddle. It was very impressive. That's a goal 9.5 times out of 10, especially coming from the stick of Panarin. So great job by him. And it was like had a little bit of a playoff feel that game. Again, the low scoring goaltending duel. Maybe it's maybe what could have been, or maybe what could be in the relatively near future, with both of these teams expected to be competitive. Obviously, Islanders kind of crapped the bed on that one this season. But we all would like to think that next year they'll both be in the postseason, and maybe we get a taste. I mean, that would be something else. Not only seeing those goaltenders battling just during the year, but if they can match up during the playoffs, what a storyline that would be.
And certainly in the next 24 hours or so are going to be a real indicator of where the Islanders are headed in the postseason, and the offseason, and into next year too, with the direction of the team. And obviously, Shawnee, you mentioned Cal Clutterbuck and Andy Green on a maintenance day, and I think that a lot of us can read the tea leaves. And granted, I know Barry Trotz kind of started out his post-game press conference today saying, it was, don't read into anything and this and that. And, Barry, I will say Barry Trotz has never been one to lie to the media directly, but certainly, two things can kind of be true at the same time, right? Andy Green and Cal Clutterbuck definitely could have needed a maintenance day 100%. I mean, they're playing a back-to-back. Two guys that are a little bit older. They play a physical style. Cal Clutterbuck plays a physical style brand of hockey, so, he can get a little banged up here and there for sure. And Andy Green is an aging veteran. Certainly can't hurt to rest him from time to time when you have the opportunity. And that can all be true. At the same time, I think it's very clear that also you put them on the shelf for a night or two, because teams may be calling for these guys, or you may be trying to move these guys. Both of those things can be true. I know, kind of the two worlds combining here, but when you look back at the NBA trade deadline and Steve Nash, the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, talking about trading James Harden, he said for days, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. What happens at the deadline? Major trade there. I don't think that this is the same case, because I don't think that, Barry Trotz, as secretive as the New York Islanders organization is when it comes to trades, injuries, and roster moves and things like that, I don't think that they're one to kind of go in that route to kind of misdirect people, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, yes, like you said, maybe they just needed a maintenance day.
Right.
But if they didn't...
Two things can be true at the same time.
Right, but if they didn't, it would be very Lou to just chalk it up as a maintenance day. Because you see teams do this all the time now, pulling a guy out of the lineup. But they don't give an extra... They're just like, we're around the trade deadline. The guy's not dressing tonight. You know why. Right. But Lou is like, just, tell everybody it's a maintenance day. Like he's fooling anybody. You know what I mean? It's just funny to see. But either way, it adds intrigue. It helped us out because it gave us a nice talking point for the show. And... we've been wondering kind of over these last couple of weeks, how active is Lou going to be? Is he going to hang on to guys because he has plans to keep them for next year? And also, you talk about the loyalty that he has to his players that's been talked about on the show and talked about elsewhere. And I think that's something that maybe fans kind of lose sight of sometimes. And obviously a balance needs to be found between making sure you get the most out of your assets and also creating a welcoming and loyal atmosphere to your players, because you talk about the reputation that Lou Lamoriello has built up, and people say he's very loyal. He's tremendously loyal. He makes, he follows through on his word and stuff like that, right? So, you can't always look at these players like just cogs in a machine, just pawns on a chess table. They have families, they have
Right.
lives, and I think that's part of what the discussion is about Lou being a loyal guy and a guy who goes to bat for his players, so to speak, and that, he might have conversations with some of these guys, maybe more so with a veteran than a younger guy,
Right.
but say like, hey, listen, Lou, I'd really appreciate it if you just let me play out the year here. And Lou might be the type of guy who says, you know what, we don't need that 5th-round pick. And when you can stick around. When you talk about an Andy Green or Cal Clutterbuck, whoever, not to say that Cal's worth a fifth rounder, but the point is that these are decisions that might be made behind the scenes where fans might scratch their head saying, hey, this guy's leaving this summer anyway.
Right.
Why don't you get whatever you can get for him? But at the same time, it's funny, you talk about like Barry Trotz and guys earning street cred, right, on the ice. Maybe Lou also, it's a way for a general manager to earn street cred with players around the league where guys are more inclined to sign with a Lou Lamoriello-run team knowing that he's going to take care of them when they come to town in situations like this.
I think that's part of it, but I don't necessarily know if I believe that as much as maybe others might. I just don't know. I don't know that when a guy, a big name free agent is looking to sign with teams that, Lou Lamoriello is going to take care of you, is as high up there as, this team is going to win me a Stanley Cup.
Oh,
or I'm going to, right?
Of course.
Maybe if it's between two teams that, if the Islanders were in the same position that they were in last year coming into this season where, they're highly favored to win a cup, this, that, and the other, maybe you're balancing between going to, say, like a Florida Panthers or New York Islanders or you're balancing going to the Penguins or the Caps, something like that. Maybe that sways. I don't know. I don't know if that does though. To be perfectly frank with you.
Well, at the start of it, I said it's a balance you kind of have to find, right? Because let's just throw this out there. It's not something that would happen, but let's just say some team in playoff position needs a defenseman, and they're like, Lou, really desperate here. I'll give you a 2nd-rounder for Andy Green. Lou's going to call Andy up and say, listen, buddy, I love you. I know we talked about keeping you around, but I got to sell high here.
Right.
2nd-round pick, I got to let you go, buddy. And Lou, we've talked about how he can be cold-hearted too and how he's going to make the tough decisions.
Right.
And make sure he does right by the team. So I think he just is the type of guy who tries to find the best balance between those two things, where taking care of a player, where maybe like if all he can get for a guy is a 7th-rounder, he's like, listen, I'm not going to uproot this guy's family for a 7th-round pick.
Right.
Maybe that sort of thing. I'm sure there's a fine line. I'm sure he has it well defined in his own brain. But it's interesting to think about because, it's just not front and center on the minds of fans who are just like, get whatever you can, right? And move on and stockpile for the summer,
Yeah, there's also an understanding too that a fan base is gonna kind of jump to each dramatic end of whatever the situation is at that point. So if a general manager is following what the fans and the peanut gallery is screaming, that's also a huge problem.
Absolutely.
When it comes to running an organization of any kind. But when you look at the Islanders, I agree with you to an extent where Lou Lamoriello's not going to make a deal just because he feels like he has to make a deal. I think that's been pretty evident in his tenure here with the Islanders. I think that's been pretty evident. In basically every stop that he's had over the course of his career, running professional hockey organizations over the last 3 decades now, I guess it's been, maybe longer.
Forever?
Yeah, right.
Basically.
So, I think when you're looking at the Andy Green and Cal Clutterbuck discussion, especially, like I said, I think two things can be true. I think there's very much a market for those two players, and the Islanders have certainly heard from teams. I also think that both players probably did need a maintenance day, and this was a good opportunity against a Philadelphia Flyers team that is kind of in the same boat as the Islanders are. They just traded their captain in Claude Giroux, and they're going through a major change too, where you don't necessarily need to have Clutterbuck and Andy Green out there, regardless of what the situation, and then you throw on top of it, it's the trade deadline. So I think that's kind of what we saw at play this afternoon.
Well, either way, I think chances of Andy Green and or Cal Clutterbuck being traded, the chances have increased at least a little bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, folks, we got a break because Dave Pagnotta of the Fourth Period is going to join us. I want to thank you so much for tuning in live at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY and your favorite podcast providers. We'll be right back.
Nikki, where should I go to watch the Islander game?
Dad, where should Fran go to watch the Islander game? Just tell her to go to RJ Daniels.
Love the Isles? Go to RJ Daniels and enjoy your favorite hockey team with their big screen TVs and in-game sound. RJ Daniels also provides indoor and outdoor dining, catering, a vibrant late-night bar scene, and weekly live entertainment. Need great planials? Go to RJ Daniels. Call or visit online at rjdaniels.com.
From the Coliseum to UBS Arena, we're still rocking the barn.
We made a product based on something that we're big fans of.
You're going to rock the barn, you're going to have a barn rocker.
Oyster Bay Brewing Company's Barn Rocker, available at UBS Arena and everywhere beer is sold.
I don't want to hear it. It's over. I can't believe they fell short again.
Yeah, but they played so well. They made it to the semifinals 2 years in a row.
The semifinals aren't the cup. God damn it, I hate those Lightning.
They'll get another shot at it next year.
I don't even want to talk about it anymore, all right? They lost, okay? Let me just sit here and enjoy the one thing that makes me a little bit happy. This fresh, delicious, tasty, meaty, turkey-filled Blue Line combo. I eat 3 every day to help keep me strong.
Hey, Donnie, can I have one of those?
Coming right up. Talk about a blast from the Blue Line.
Blue Line Deli and Bagels. Our goal is to make you a hero.
Hope you enjoyed the ads. Now let's get back to Hockey Night in New York with Sean Cuthbert and Christian Arnold.
Welcome back to Hockey Night in New York. Obviously, a very busy time for our guests tonight. On the line, brought to you by our friends over at Tide Technology. That, of course, is the great Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period. Dave, I know it's been a busy day already, and I'm sure it's going to be a busy Monday for you tomorrow, so we appreciate you giving us a few minutes here. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, guys. There's, certainly a lot of activity going on, to say the least, but things are still brewing, things are still percolating, and let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Should be an exciting time. We'll get right to it, Dave. Obviously, here the focus, of course, is on what the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello are going to do over the next 24 hours or so. And the focus now seems to be on Cal Clutterbuck and Andy Green, with both of them being held out for maintenance days. Is there any rumblings that you're hearing that these two could be on the move within the next couple hours or so?
It's been quieter than normal. With respect to the Islanders, you know how much they keep things pretty tight. We try to do as much as you can, but it's been pretty quiet. We know there are teams that have expressed interest in Cal Clutterbuck. It seems to me like if something were to happen, if he is moved, it's more likely than not that teams are going to want to have some of that $3.5 million cap hit retained. So, how much of an appetite does Lou and do the Islanders have in order to do that? And is the team going to pay a little bit extra in order for that to happen? So that's something to certainly watch. Yes, there's interest in them. How far along we are with respect to a potential move there, it's really hard to say at this stage.
No question, Dave. Sean here. So just to keep it on the Isles for a minute, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth through Islander country. Are they going to be busy? They're going to get rid of as many guys as possible to get as many assets as possible to go into the summer and kind of retool for next season. Do you have a hunch, just or a gut feeling, whether you think they're going to be more active or maybe a little quieter than people expected? Maybe even some of these UFAs like Parisi, who's expressed an interest in staying, maybe he ends up hanging on to those guys to sign them in the offseason. Do you think they're going to be busy or a little quieter this trade deadline?
It's leading up into today, it sounded like they were going to be fairly quiet. I mean, I don't anticipate, unless something changes, now and in the next, 19, 20 hours, I'm not really expecting too much. I mean, maybe they move out Clutterbuck. Other than that, I don't see it. I know some teams were poking around on Seany and Varlamov, but with that extra year on this deal at $5 million, I mean, I don't really know how much of an appetite teams have to make that happen. There are teams out there that have poked around, like I said, like Vegas and Edmonton and Toronto and a couple others, but I haven't heard anything overly close, on that front. So I don't know. I'm not expecting, and it certainly didn't sound like the other day, like there was something close with respect to Parise. Haven't heard much on Chara's front. And yes, Andy Green, while he was, out for maintenance, whether that's actual maintenance or whatnot, not really sure. But again, haven't heard too much. Don't be overly surprised if there's, not a lot of action, unless something, completely comes out of left field, because we know that some teams have asked about guys, like Josh Bailey and like Scott Mayfield. I just don't know if there's enough runway at this stage to get to that finish line on either of those fronts. So if you're expecting a busy Islander trade deadline, don't think that's going to happen.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Islander Country, pump your brakes, because it might be a sleepy one. But just to broaden it out to the rest of the league, you got some bigger names now heading elsewhere. Claude Giroux going down to Florida. You got Giordano going to Toronto. That's a big pickup for them on the defensive end. Do you think this maybe opens the floodgates now, where you see some other bigger names heading elsewhere? You got Philip Forsberg, a guy who apparently is trying to sign an extension in Nashville, but maybe he's a guy they can't get a deal done, so he ends up going elsewhere. Do you see some more bigger names flying around before we hit the deadline tomorrow?
If it's going to be bigger names, it's likely guys with term. Kind of on their contract. Most of the big rental pieces have either re-signed with their clubs, like Thomas Hertl in San Jose, or they've already been dealt, like, Giroux and Lindholm and Mark Giordano today going to Toronto. It doesn't really sound like Philip Forsberg, for example. I was told about a little over an hour ago that there's nothing close on an extension on their front. However, there still seems to be a mutual understanding that they want to get to that finish line. It doesn't sound like tomorrow's deadline is a deadline to get an extension done. So if they don't get that done, they're going to table things, let them focus on trying to make the playoffs, let them focus on their run, and then reconvene in the offseason. Yeah, they've had conversations with other teams. I would be pretty surprised if Philip Forsberg is dealt. Just again, because Nashville is right in the thick of things in the wild card race in the West. I think they've got to make the playoffs the way that they're performing. I don't see how trading Forsberg makes a lot of sense from that perspective when both sides still want to get a deal done. So I would be surprised if he's moved. Like I said, if it's anybody from a big name perspective, like a Jacob Chikrin, for example, I mean, it's guys like him that are, signed with term on their deal, whether it's a Travis Konechny in Philly, or a Tyler Bertuzzi in Detroit, a Connor Garland in Vancouver. These are guys with term on their contract. If we're going to see bigger names move, it's those caliber players that are signed beyond this season.
Talking with Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period here on the line, brought to you by our friends over at Tide Technology. Dave, you just did mention Tyler Bertuzzi, and I did want to just circle back to the Islanders. Obviously, there's been some speculation that there might be interest in there in Bertuzzi coming to the Island. I'm curious to get your sense of the situation and the reality of what that could look like.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know there are teams do this. A lot of teams do their due diligence and kind of poke around and see what the asking price is going to be for some of these players. That's certainly, a player that not only Islanders, but a lot of teams would love to get their hands on, especially based on his performance this year, just having a tremendous season. That's why he's out there. I mean, he was available last season. Detroit was willing to listen on him. They listened on Anthony Mantha, whom they eventually traded to Washington. If he is dealt, you're looking at a first-round pick, a young, very good young NHL caliber player, and another asset. However, that ends up a pick, another prospect, or something like that. So you're looking at three pretty significant pieces that would have to be swapped out in order to get your hands on a Tyler Bertuzzi, who's got another year left on his contract. So it's obviously not. It's a hefty price. There's no bargain here for Bertuzzi. Detroit has no need to, rush potentially moving him as they go through their, rebuild and retool out there in Michigan. So I haven't heard too much in terms of what a potential return could look like in terms of specifics with respect to, the Islanders, but that's the type of deal that it would take in order to pry, Tyler Bertuzzi out of Detroit from any team.
And Dave, essentially, the price for a deal at the deadline is typically more expensive than over the summer, right? I mean, if you're a team like the Islanders who's on the outside looking in, it kind of behooves them to wait until summertime anyway. Now, obviously, if they have an eye on this guy and they want to get him before somebody else, maybe they get a little more proactive. But if they're looking to pick up a player of his ilk, does it make more sense for them to just wait till the summer anyway? Do you find that the prices are usually higher at the deadline compared to over the summer when you have more time to kind of hammer a deal out, and maybe there's not as many teams vying for an individual player?
In this particular circumstance, I mean, normally yes, but in this particular circumstance, because Detroit's out of it, they're not going to be making the playoffs. The Islanders, 19 points out. I mean, it's a ridiculously tough hill to climb here. To be realistic, and yes, they were not dealt a very good hand earlier this season, and it's affected them, or affected them then. But, because you're talking about effectively two teams that are on the outside looking in, whether this type of deal happens now or it happens in the offseason, there's really no sense of urgency at this point.
Right.
Because, both teams, they pretty much know their fate.
Right.
So you're talking about a hockey-type trade that really is not going to affect the immediate. So this is a little bit different. Last season, Detroit was way out of it. Washington wanted to add another piece that not only would help them then, but also down the road. So they might have coughed up a little bit more for that particular player at the time. But in this particular instance, because these are effectively two non-playoff teams, whether it happens now or happens in the summer around the draft, those conversations for the most part are pretty much going to be the same.
Interesting. Dave, I'm curious now, as you mentioned, we are closing in on the NHL trade deadline. There are a lot of names floating about that could be on the move tomorrow. I'm wondering what sense you're getting as far as the activeness of NHL GMs by the 3 o'clock deadline. And is there a team you're expecting to be very active tomorrow in hopes of trying to bolster a deeper playoff run or a Stanley Cup run?
I think Colorado's got something else that they'd like to do. I believe it's up front. It wouldn't certainly shock me to see them make an acquisition within the next 19 hours or so. Here, everybody is waiting on the New York Rangers,
right?
To see what the heck they're going to do, what else they're going to do. They added Vetrano earlier this week from Florida, but everyone's just kind of sitting back, going, "All right, you've got cap space, you've got flexibility. What the heck's going on here? When are we going to see something?" I do know that, there were some talks going into the weekend with respect to Georgiev. I haven't heard too much since. In fact, I was told this morning that it's at this point just chatter, and it doesn't look like there's anything overly significant. So unless something has happened since this morning, it looks like they're primarily looking to add somewhere on this roster. They were in on a few of the defensemen that were out there. They were in on, some of the forwards, whether it's a Ricard Raquel or a Max Domi, who are probably the top two rental forwards still available in the market. And then you kind of have a Phil Kessel after that. They may go in a different direction. So I'm waiting to see what happens there. Chicago is going to continue to be active. We're still waiting on Marc-Andre Fleury. Is he going to go to Minnesota? Can they figure that out? And then what happens with Calvin DeHaan? What happens with Dominic Kubalik? And so on, because they have so many other pieces. They're playing right now, and all those guys are in the lineup. So we'll see what kind of happens there. They're playing the Jets, who have Andrew Kopp in the lineup as well. And this is a guy that a lot of teams that I mentioned, New York, Colorado, Boston, and a few others also have interest in. So just, something to keep tabs on in that particular game. But I think Chicago's going to have a few more moves up their sleeve here by the time we hit the deadline.
Right on, Dave. And last one from me. Now, granted, the bulk of deals are going to happen, coming down to the wire here tomorrow. But out of what you've seen so far, not necessarily the best guy, the best player that's been traded, but which team has helped themselves the most, maybe to round themselves out the most, plug the biggest hole they might have had heading in here, where you're like, okay, that team is looking much more prime now, or better prime now for a run in the playoffs here, just from what you've seen so far?
Well, there's a couple. Obviously the Giroux addition in Florida is huge. He's going to be given an opportunity to play with, Sasha Barkov or Huberto or whoever, Bennett, Duclair, Verhaeghe. They're stacked up front. They made themselves that much better and that much deeper up front.
Yeah.
And, I like that, but I also really like the addition of Ben Sherratt on the back end for this team. There were a lot of teams that were interested in Sherratt, and I know, at least on social media anyway, he gets, pooped on every now and again because he's not an elite, type of defenseman. But this is a guy that's played 54 playoff games in the last 4 seasons, 27, I believe, in the last 2.
Wow.
There were a lot of teams that see that and just value the heck out of that for good reason. So for Florida to bring in this caliber of a player who's, going to either be on their second or third pair with all that experience that he's got, plus, the fact that he went to a Stanley Cup final last season, that's a lot of value there. I really like that addition. Their cousins in Tampa, I mean, this is another team that they just find a way to make these shrewd additions.
Yeah.
And acquiring Brandon Hagel and Nick Paul today, just an hour ago, just makes them that much deeper and that much more dangerous, I think, because of they're trying to redo that magic of the third line that they had for those couple cup runs. That was another really interesting. Those 2 additions for Tampa for me, another team that really, really stood out.
Well, Dave, always fantastic stuff. Always great having you on. You got a lot of fun coming up here for the next 12 to 24 hours, so enjoy it. Good luck, and look forward to having you on again down the road.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Yeah, lots of espresso and lots of Red Bull.
Enjoy
100%.
it.
Enjoy. Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period. Always great to have him on with us and great insight here. Less than 24 hours away from the NHL trade deadline. We're probably right now, it's 8:31 p.m. here on the Eastern Seaboard. So that's 19, 20 hours away from that 3 p.m. deadline or something.
Give or take. Yeah, I don't really feel like trying the math right now, so I'm just going to go with it. You're probably right on the money.
But absolutely great stuff. As always, appreciate his time. I know it's a busy time of year, especially this close to the deadline, so we appreciate Dave coming on with us and giving that insight. Certainly a lot of interesting stuff, too. Just want to point out the Rangers edition. Frankie Vetrano gets the empty netter goal. They're going to beat Carolina 3-0, it looks like. But
couple of big wins
stuff
for the Rangers recently.
But
beat Tampa the other night.
Last night might hurt
today.
Not today, because they didn't play today. They played Tampa yesterday.
It feels like today. All these days just keep getting combined together. But go on.
But I was gonna say, certainly a lot of interesting stuff there. Just from an Islander standpoint, it sounds like it could be a very sleepy sort of trade deadline for Islander fans here. It sounds like there may not be as many moves as people would like.
I think B-Comp gave us the warning last week. He kind of cooled our tempers on Varlamov, right? He kind of turned me because I was very much in the camp of, he's going. They're going to get whatever they can. But, again, there was some reason made for him to be kept, So I think with a couple of these guys, it's going to come down to Lou just getting an offer he can't refuse. You know what I mean? Like, literally somebody just banging on his door being like, Lou, look, I'm throwing all this stuff at you. We need him, Varlamov, whoever it is, Clutterbuck. And Lou's going to be like, I can't turn this deal down.
Yeah, I mean, that's always Lou Lamorielle's MO, especially when they're more in a listening mode and not an active mode, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's what the mindset is right now.
Yeah.
It seems like it's, all right, we're here. Our phones are open. Our door is open. Send us an offer. We'll look at it.
Right.
Doesn't mean we're going to take it or accept it just because you think we will. And I think that's kind of the mode that Lou Lamoriello is in right now. I think the Islanders, considering kind of where their almost purgatory-like status was up until really today, officially today, where you weren't really sure were they turning things around? Could this be salvaged a little bit?
Today put a rubber stamp on that.
Yeah.
And another one.
But so they were kind of in this weird purgatory-like state the last couple weeks here while everyone was trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where the Islanders are going to stay. It's there's not necessarily a need or an urgent sense that, you need to trade Cal Clutterbuck or you need to trade Andy Green. Yeah, I understand the idea, I guess, of getting something before losing somebody for nothing. But
not only that,
but what's the package that you're getting back that's going to be so spectacular? You know what I mean?
It's minimal.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, maybe Lou can set himself up to kind of gather some better assets over the course of time, right? Like maybe if he gets a fifth for one guy and a third for another guy, and then you get to the draft and he packages a third and a fifth for a second, you know, like maybe he can kind of build like that. And I see that end of it as far as, look, get as many assets as you can so you can turn them into something else. Of course, that makes sense. But again, there's a balance, I think, between all this stuff, and he's going to gauge whether he thinks it's worth it for one deal or not. But look, he's going to have the phones on. He's going to listen and see what people have to offer. You still have Fleury out there who might get dealt, which, kind of, maybe he's a guy that teams go for before Varlamov. You don't know. If he comes off the market, then Varlamov maybe gets a heftier price when another team.
I also think the cap hit that Varley comes with and the time on his contract are like, if you're sort of a cap crunch team and you're saying, all right, well, not only we need him for this season, but do we keep him around for next season?
Right.
Kind of up in the air. Is Varlamov the guy you want to go after? I understand. He has Vezina-like numbers from last season. He's played well enough where you're comfortable him being your 1B.
He's still a great goalie. As far as I'm concerned, he's still a great goalie.
But is it? I guess the question I'm asking is, if you're a team that's up against the crunch and you can get like a Marc-Andre Fleury or someone else on a rental deal, is that the move you're going to make to go after Seany Varlamov? I don't know. That's the question. I'm not an NHL general manager. I don't know.
Right.
But my sense would be, if I was, Varlamov would not be my top choice. He wouldn't be top of the list.
Yeah, again, I guess if there was a team who also needed a backstop for next year, then he's more appealing. Maybe there's one of those teams in the playoff race right now who could use a guy beyond that year, and his cap hit isn't that prohibitive. I mean, $5 million isn't awful. I mean, it's a lot for a backup, but if there's a team who kind of has goalies on maybe some smaller salaries or whatever, without us going through cap friendly and looking at every team and what have you, but.
Right.
He, because even just him and Sorokin together, what, $5 and $4 million, I think, combined, $9 million combined.
Right.
That's still less than Bobrovsky on his own at $10 million.
You're also talking about a rookie goaltender in there. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have to match that $5 million that Varley has on those cap hits, with another starting goaltender at NHL level, starter numbers.
Again, like there might be a team with the right recipe. We don't know. There's no reason to talk about something that may not exist. But
regardless,
yes,
it seems like things are kind of shaping up to be a little less interesting for the Islanders. Although the way that Dave put it, it seems like it could be a very interesting day for the Rangers, who are
have a ton of cap room,
priming themselves for what I think they believe is going to be a deep run in the playoffs. And
fools.
I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying they're priming themselves for a deep run in the playoffs, and certainly I think their play this season has warranted at least some belief in that. When you look at New York's everlasting need to break its championship-less streak.
I don't think they're there yet.
Championship draft.
They're not there yet. They're not getting past Carolina, whether they face them in the first or the second round.
They just beat them 2-0.
The regular season means nothing. Nothing. It has no bearing on what happens in the playoffs.
We will certainly see. Tomorrow will certainly shape a lot of different things for both New York hockey franchises. That seems like it's for sure.
The Rangers are still too green. They're not going to get. They might get past the first round. Maybe they'll beat Pittsburgh, because that's probably who they're going to line up against. But they're not getting past Carolina. They're not.
We will see.
That's my super professional opinion on that. But anyway. As far as the Islanders go, yeah, I think it's going to be quiet. And it's going to tie a lot into the fact that they still believe that this is a team that's going to compete next year. So they're going to keep most of these guys because they're going to want them around to be a part of that, to be a part of that retooling. Now, I think a guy like Josh Bailey, we could end up being surprised, and he could end up being dealt for a little bit of a reshuffling. A guy like Anthony Beauvillier I wouldn't think it'd be out of complete left field if one of those two guys were dealt. I think after the obvious pending unrestricted free agents or Varlamov, I think Bailey and Beauvillier are maybe the next guys who could possibly go. I said enough about Scotty Mayfield. I don't think he's going anywhere. That doesn't make sense to me, because then you just have another defensive void to fill on a contract that's beautiful for him right now. So I just don't see why they would do that. So And again, like the guys that could be on the block, you're not going to get much for them. So get what you can if you make any deals. And I think the summer is really going to be the big telltale of what the Islanders are going to be next year. I mean, that's when they're going to look at free agency, see who's left in the pool. Maybe the Islanders can design some sort of John Tavares-style pitching to Philip Forsberg like they did with JT. Because it's funny, I'm listening to the Philip Forsberg talk with Dave, and I'm like, maybe they hang on to him, but he doesn't sign a contract. They get close to July 1. They don't have any sort of deal in place, and then Lou shows up during that pitch window, and then all of a sudden Philip Forsberg's wearing orange and blue. You never know. You never know. Dare to dream.
I mean, listen, the offseason is I agree with you, Sean. The offseason is where the Islanders are going to make their magic happen, so to speak. This right now, if anything, is you're starting to clear some of the books for those offseason moves. And so, Brian, you're right. Brian was the first one to kind of forewarn us, I guess, that this may be more of a day where it's just the Islanders kind of sitting pretty and riding out the rest of the season as is. And, Dave comes on and he seems to kind of reaffirm that might be the case.
And I know we got some questions about some other guys in there for Questions Brewing, so we will hit those later as well. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it's going to be a quieter deadline.
These days are always
Islanders.
quiet.
I mean, they, in fairness to the league, the last year or two or three, it's been a little louder on the deadline front. I feel like more things have happened, and maybe that's almost, I guess, eco-bias just because of the Islanders were in the mix,
right?
Which made it a lot more exciting here. You get Pagnotta and Palmieri and Andy Green, 3 years in a row, right? So they basically made a deadline deal each of the last 3 years that Lou was at the helm. So definitely a change of pace for the Islanders. But and I feel like league-wide, maybe there's been some more deals. I don't have the numbers on that, but it felt that way. And I'm going to go with that. But I think we're going to make a move right now.
And now, it's time for What's on Tap, brought to you by RJ Daniels, American Bar and Grill.
That's right, folks. It's time for What's on Tap, brought to you by RJ Daniels. Christian, you're the man with the plan. What's on tap? They have 18 games this week?
Four games this week. It's a busy week for the Islanders. They start with
the
Ottawa.
Rest of them are.
The Ottawa Senators make their appearance at the UBS Arena Tuesday at 7:30. Then the Detroit Red Wings are in town on Thursday at 7:30. Islanders have a quick trip up to Boston for a noon 30 afternoon start on Saturday, followed by a TNT national broadcast with I believe Brendan Burke is on the call nationally for that game.
Okay.
2 p.m. against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, this was, of course, billed as as a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference Final, and I'm sure TNT was really stoked and genuinely stoked to have that game on. It was it was a great series, and everyone who watched it enjoyed the hockey as a whole. Everyone can kind of agree that it was just a fun series to watch, regardless of sort of the outcome of the series as a whole, but. Not the nationally televised throwdown that TNT, I'm sure, hoped that it was going to be, but a busy week for the Islanders, a chance to play spoiler a little bit with Tampa Bay, some of the better teams in the league coming through, Boston and Tampa at the end of that. Ottawa is obviously Ottawa. Then we'll see apparently Travis Hamonic again, who's dealt to the Ottawa Senators today, this afternoon.
Right, yeah. Has Hamonic been in the building yet? Yes, he has. When Vancouver came, he was on the ice. That's right. He played that game.
And
that's right.
We'll see Tyler Bertuzzi as well.
Indeed.
Future New York Islander, maybe, sort of.
Future potential, almost, maybe, New York Islander.
I still don't foresee that happening.
I don't necessarily see it either.
I think it would be a lot. There's a high asking price that I'm not sure the owners have the assets that they, A, want to, or B, need to give up to make a deal like that, just going off of what Dave was saying before, as well as sort of the other off-ice stuff that I think comes with Tyler Bertuzzi. Even if you're looking at next year and sort of what I would imagine is lifting a lot of the mandates and kind of COVID restrictions that the league has put in place in itself. I don't necessarily know if Tyler Bertuzzi is a Lou guy or an Islanders organization guy at the moment, or even next year.
Well, you look how the Islanders handled Bodie Wild.
Well, I mean, but
and they're just like, see you later, have fun in Europe.
Right.
Now, obviously, things were different when that happened. There was a lot more restrictions. Things have loosened up a bit more, but that may just be something that the Islanders don't even want to deal with. So he might be a guy off their radar until there's just no restrictions anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would imagine, or you would hope, I guess, anyway, that the restrictions at that point, at least to go north of the border, would be lifted. That wouldn't be an issue. For the how many whatever number of games they go up there each year to play Toronto, Winnipeg, all those Canadian teams, and obviously the Islanders don't deal with sort of some of the mandates that you would have to deal with if you were playing literally. If the building was probably 3 feet to the left, they would be dealing with if they were a New York, were a New York City team.
That's right.
But even with all of that being said, and a prediction of what some normality back, and I would imagine some of these restrictions being gone, I just don't foresee Bertuzzi even being a team like a guy that Lou Lamoriello would want to bring into the organization outside of that.
Okay.
Who knows? Who knows? That could be something they could have kicked the tires. They said, listen, we like you. If things go according to what everyone kind of hopes is planned, and you start to see some of those restrictions lifted, we'll circle back and we'll try again. But I don't know if that's their guy at the moment. I don't know if that's their guy.
Okay, fair enough. Appreciate the Islanders' insight from you there, Christian.
Nice,
right?
Nice.
But looking at these games coming ahead, you have this 6-game point streak, 5-0-1 come to a close against a team like Philly that they're supposed to beat. Granted, second to back-to-back. They have a lot of these games in this condensed schedule, so maybe you're a little more forgiving of them losing to a team like Philly in a normal year. But if they were going to go on that 20-3 run to get back into the playoffs, Philadelphia is not the team to be one of those 3 that you lose against. Because you look at these upcoming games like Ottawa, winnable. Detroit, winnable. Boston, winnable, but obviously tougher. In Boston, tougher. Yes. Tampa, extremely tough. But maybe that's one of the 3, But now it's again, it's you look at these games and you support the team, you want them to win, and it's a double-edged sword because the more they win now, it's just less balls in the lottery pool. But you want to ride out the rest of the season on a higher note, feel confident about going into next year, and I think we touched on this last week. Is now it's more of an assessment period, more just seeing what this team can be when things are more normalized next season and after whatever changes they make to the roster.
Right.
And, we keep kind of beating this note to death, but they do have a team that you can still build around to bounce back and make a strong effort. The defense is still there. The goaltending is still there. It's really just that transition from defense to offense, I think, is where they really need to find their niche. And Dobson coming up here into his own is a good sign on that front. And hopefully guys like, what do you got there?
I was like, who in the world is Dobson?
I know it's gotten far enough.
I was like, was that his name? Is that his actual name, or is that the nickname he gave him?
Right, which is it?
It took me a moment to register, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Sean. There, I think you're pretty spot on with everything that you're saying right here, because at this point, you're kind of just looking for the things that are going to carry over to the 2022-23 season. Who are the guys that deserve to stick around, and you build around, and you kind of continue to kind of make that push towards the 5th cup that Islander fans have been praying for since the 1980s. And who is the more expendable pieces? Who do you move around a bit that makes space or opens up a spot for another younger player developing that deserves a shot up here, or a player that you need to bring in to kind of take that team to the next level?
Yeah, and the intrigue with a Clutterbuck and a Green being on the block tells you that they might be ready to move on from these guys. And maybe, just maybe, this is the end of the best 4th line in hockey until Ross Johnston can prove himself with Cizikas and Matt Martin, or whatever we end up seeing in the days coming ahead. But, I mean, it also would be kind of hilarious and wouldn't shock me if Clutterbuck gets dealt and then he's re-signed in the offseason and they bring him back just because of how loyal Lou is to these guys.
I mean,
it would be funny.
Funny might not be the word.
It would be funny for me.
Sometimes there's a point, right, which Charles Wong was a loyal guy, and to a fault.
Yeah.
It was great for his belief in the organization, his belief in keeping the team on Long Island, but at a certain point you went, there's some guys that you're a little too loyal to. And I think if you're talking about letting, Andy Green or Cal Clutterbuck be traded at this point and then bringing them back next year, I understand they'd probably be league minimum or very small contracts. Is that really the route you want to go? Like, I just don't know if that sends the right message that you're moving the organization forward.
We're very much in fantasy land right now, but just to wrap it up on that, if they actually did happen to trade Clutterbuck and then bring him back, I would have the same attitude towards it as I did towards the Martin contract, where he signs a $1 million deal. It's really negligible in the grand scheme as far as affecting the cap. It's a guy that they like having around, having him in the locker room. That's fine. If he pans out, great. If he doesn't, and you have to go to extremes, the contract is variable. So it's like, to me, it's inconsequential. It would depend on the contract. But just to get to the greater point of this is that it looks like they may finally be moving on from the Cal Clutterbuck caliber players for their fourth line, where you're not paying a guy $3.5 million to be your right winger on the fourth.
Right.
Just promoting a guy like Ross Johnston, who makes $1.1, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you have an extra $2.5 million to put towards a guy who can put some goals on the board for you. You know what I mean? So maybe that's where the mentality's heading, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, certainly not.
Right.
But yeah, that is what's on tap for this week. A couple of hockey games.
We got somebody who can say that for you, buddy.
Okay.
That was What's on Tap.
I don't like him.
RJ Daniels.
Don't like him.
I know you don't.
Bar and
I'm
Grill.
well aware.
Sounds like kind of a putz.
Wow. No, he's a great man. We talked about this.
No,
or was that the Questions Brewing guy? He's a different guy.
Yeah. I like that guy.
Yeah,
I like
you're
the
okay with that
Questions
guy?
Brewing
Okay, yeah, he's also a nice guy. So yeah, there you have it, folks. That's What's on Tap. Brought to you by RJ Daniels, American Bar and Grill. Would you like to break for the hero?
I would love to break for a hero.
Oh, sorry, man. Donnie didn't deliver today.
All right. Okay. We'll break for the hero.
We'll break for the hero. So, folks, hope you're having fun out there. Thanks so much for tuning into twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY and your favorite podcast providers. We will take a brief break. When we come back, the hero of the week.
Customer service is the backbone of any great business, and reliable telecommunication is essential to keeping your client base happy. Introducing TIE Technology, a low-cost, flexible internet phone service founded on the idea that every customer deserves exceptional service while providing simple setup and management and easy integration to clients across the country. TIE Technology will not only create a custom solution tailored to your specific needs, but will partner with you to provide a competitive edge to you and your clients. And if you need support, you won't be routed to an automated call center in another country. You'll get a live representative that had a personal hand in building your account. So Islander fans, if your business is looking for a change from companies like Spectrum, Verizon, or Optimum, TIE Technology is offering 3 free months of service for any of its affordable packages. Just call 516-856-7800. That's 516-856-7800, or visit them on the web at tietechnology.com. That's TIE, T-I-E technology.com. TIE Technology, the right choice for your internet phone service.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen, and when you hear this song, that means it's time for the Hero of the Week, brought to you by the Blue Line Deli and Bagels half-price hero, which this week is the White Whale, with chicken cutlet, bacon, onion rings, gravy, fresh mozzarella on a toasted garlic hero. Sounds delicious. Are you hungrier now, Christian?
That's brutal.
Get it for half price all week starting tomorrow.
So good.
That is Monday through next week, where we, of course, will announce a brand new half-off hero. Stop on into the Huntington location of Blue Line Deli. Mention Hockey Night New York for half off the White Whale. The Whale Blanco?
I don't know what whale is in Spanish, but Blanco, yeah.
The Wale Blanco? That's terrible. No, that's not correct.
That's not correct.
So, Christian, after that nonsense, please share with us your hero of the week.
I think if you can put 2 and 2 together, I think you know who my hero of the week is anyway. That'd be the great Ilya Sorokin for what was an absolutely dominating performance in a goaltending duel against the New York Rangers. Had one of the best, if not the best, saves of the year in the National Hockey League there in that game. That was, I believe, SportsCenter top 10 highlight. I think it won.
Pretty sure it was number one. Christian.
That's what I was getting to.
Cristiano Arnold.
And Ilya Sorokin, obviously, despite despite, what's been a very rough season for the Islanders, he's continued to be just a standout player in net for the Islanders. He's been a shining star. When you look at the future and you go looking for something to get excited about, Ilya Sorokin has definitely checked all the boxes Islander fans could hope for going forward and going through this season, especially in that game against the Rangers, which obviously, considering what the year has meant, considering what the year was supposed to mean and how it's gone, obviously beating the Rangers is such a big thing that means a lot to New York Islander fans in a year like this. So obviously goes unnoticed.
Big statement from T-Boyle13, longtime fan, saying the best save in my fandom.
Wow.
That says a lot.
I mean, it was a great save.
I'm trying to think of any other big saves that I've seen from an Islander goalie, and nothing has come to mind. That's just also because I have the memory of an 85-year-old man with Alzheimer's. But nothing comes to mind, but it's definitely got to be up there.
I mean, for a goaltender, yes, that may be the best save that I can remember off the top of my head, but do I think it's the best save in the last 10 years by an Islanders player? I disagree.
But you got to be able to come up with one.
Ryan Pulock.
Oh, player. Cute. Adorable. That's hard to argue, but goaltender, I think, is where we were going with this. Yeah, you're going to have to come up with your Tommy Salo save or your Jamie McLennan save.
No. I was just strictly talking. You setting that up to say the Ryan Pulock goal.
Okay, well done. I like that move. Not bad, Christian.
But no, I mean, it's hard to argue. T-Boyle also has a very extensive knowledge of Islander history.
He does.
So, I mean, if he's saying that,
he just gave us the runner-up. Before that, Sorokin save. The best save was Billy Smith on Reijo Rudasolainen. Yep, that's his name. Of the Rangers, glove save in the 80s.
All right.
Didn't see it, but sure enough, if somebody disagrees, let us know. Most insane save I've seen since Hasek saves from Jeremy 13. So everybody's chiming in here. Strade 19 is 100 years old. It's the best save I've ever seen, with the possible exception of Billy Smith in Game 1 of the 4th Cup versus Edmonton when he robbed Gretzky. So we're getting a lot of great entries here.
But still saying that's the best. I mean, and it's hard to argue. Like Sean and I cannot think of a goaltender save by the Islanders that off the top of my head can top that, and the same thing for Sean. So, I mean, there's definitely precedent for that to be one of the top saves in franchise history.
I'd have to do a deep dive into the bowels of my brain.
I was going to say, the deep dive into the internet to try and
that
go
also,
back into
because
the
nothing jumps out to me. But there you go. It's a huge save in Islander history. Even more fun because it was against the Rangers. So, Christian, I commend you for your Hero of the Week pick. I went in a different direction.
Josh Bailey?
No, I did not go with Josh Bailey. I did not. But I did go with Broccoli Rob Nelson. There he is right there.
Pick as well.
Yes. Hat trick yesterday against Dallas. I'm going to say it. He's been the most consistent Islander for a while now. I'm even going beyond this season.
Which is funny when you think about it, considering how for the longest time the knock on Brock Nelson was always the fact that he had a huge October, which is where the Brocktober thing comes from.
But then Barry Trotz showed up.
No. That's what I was getting to. That's the ironic thing, is that for the longest time under previous administrations with the Islanders, that was the big thing. You saw Brock Nelson have huge Octobers, and then he kind of fade away. And since Larry Brooks, Barry Trotz, don't know why
Larry Brooks.
I think
that might have been the one thing that could have got me to quit Islander fandom, is if the Islanders hired Larry Brooks to be the coach of the team.
Barry Trotz.
I might hand my jersey in for that one.
Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello. I don't know how Larry.
It happened.
Anyway, don't know how I combine
Thomas Panic, Knobson.
But
what was the one from last week or even Thursday? There was something. It was a very Thomas Panic-y type of thing you threw out there. I think it was Thursday. I can't remember.
There was something.
Right?
I can't remember what it was.
Maybe somebody in the chat
But regardless, I was just saying that you threw me off there. That Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello come in and they've been able to sort of stabilize a lot of guys that had been sort of those question marks, I guess you could almost call them, those sort of guys that were kind of where Anthony Beauvillier is now, where they had that potential to be really good players for this team and this organization, and then they just never were able to hit that, and then they come around and whatever it was that they did, or the systems in place, or whatever it was, helped kind of turn that specific player around. And you look at a player like Anthony Beauvillier in this conversation now, and obviously there's so much speculation. Maybe he's dealt at the deadline. Is he someone that can go somewhere else and have success? It's interesting that Bo has never been the beneficiary of him, of the Barry Trotz and the coaching staff that's in place now to kind of turn that around. But again, Brock Nelson was, so I don't know.
The only place Bo has really shown consistency so far is in the playoffs. He's been a performer in the playoffs, and he's hot or cold in the regular season so far. Maybe he just needs a little extra time like Brock did in the regular season too. Who knows? I mean, I'm not ready to give up on Bavili. I believe it was when Carver filled in for you. He said he's ready. He's ready to ship him out. He's ready to.
I'm pretty sure Mike was ready to give up on Brock Nelson too at one point. So,
oh, he was a total detractor.
Yeah,
he was a total. He had to do a 180 on Nelson. Oh, I remember. He was ready to get rid of him a few years ago. Absolutely.
MJ Beckman, by the way, in the chat with the phonetic pronunciation for that
Rayo Roostalainen. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Could have used that 5 minutes ago, MJ.
Where were you, bro? Where were you?
But yeah, no, Brock Nelson, tremendous player, great pick for Player of the Week, Sean.
Career high in goals.
Nice job.
Thank you, sir. He's gonna hit over 30 goals this year in a lost season.
When's Donnie gonna get a Brock Nelson sandwich up there?
When's Donnie gonna get a new sandwich at all?
Wow, all right. Well,
I'm calling him out.
That was a little. Didn't you go to the hockey? Didn't Islander game with him yesterday?
I did. He's my buddy. It's okay. He can take it.
Being a real jerk on there, Donnie. I love every sandwich that you have at Blue Line Deli and Bagels, and I'm even rocking the swag today. So,
man, you are such a brown noser, bro.
I'm just supporting my friend. You're the one over here chirping him like there's no tomorrow.
I'm just saying it's time to mix it up a little bit. Get some more sandwiches in the mix.
The guy's running he's
a busy
empire.
Man. He's a busy man. There's plans. There's new sandwiches coming. We got the scoop. He's got some more coming down the line. But there you have it, folks. Your heroes of the week. Celia Sorokin. It's been a while since we did this. Off the rails. Hockey Night in New York.
Brought to you by Blue Line Deli.
Sorokin, Brock Nelson, your heroes of the week. Remember, folks, stop in to the Huntington location, Blue Line Deli. Mention Hockey Night in New York.
Tell them Sean wants more sandwiches, apparently.
Yeah, let them know. Let them know Sean sent you. Get your half-price hero and tell them you want more heroes. Yes. So there you go. Stop in, mention us.
The port isn't filled enough with sandwiches. They have had to put them on pieces of paper and hang them around the deli. But yeah, Sean, they need more sandwiches.
Just tell them like it is, man. This is important stuff. This is important stuff. So there you have it, folks. Your heroes of the week. Always a good time.
Boy.
So right before we head into questions brewing, just looking at those games they played this week. Again, they look a lot more like themselves. A lot more like the team that made the playoffs the last 2 years. Great game against the Rangers. Played very well yesterday against Dallas.
Yes.
Again, it's just another one of those games that makes you say, where was this team all year? And today's game just looked like, one of those games where you fall asleep a little bit.
Yeah.
And you get those
back-to-back,
right,
3 and 4 nights.
You get those every now and then. And it looked all right when Cizikas put that slapper in to put them up 1-0. But Flyers come back, and you have another mental gaffe from Sebastian Aho on one of those goals where he's coming out from the. That's the second time you did that. Are you all right? Christian's trying to wreck the set. He's trying to sabotage the set.
Boy.
So for those of you listening and not watching, that's what that loud banging noise was. He just crushed his elbow into the mic holder. Oh, that's okay. So Aho still has to work on these little mental gaps, little giveaways and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a game like today, unfortunate. But again, like you said, it makes it very clear what the Islanders' position is for the trade deadline. I mean, it's over. Selling or sleeping. That's where we're at.
Yeah. And it sounds like sleeping.
It sounds like sleeping. So let's get into.
It's time for
I didn't like the questions brewing.
Brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company, Long Island's Gold Coast Brewery.
That's right, folks. It's time for Questions Brewing, brought to you by the great Oyster Bay Brewing Company, as well as their delicious honey ale.
Delicious.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, Christian, give us some questions.
All right, Questions Brewing. We'll start with T-Boyle 13 jumping in early right off the bat. Barring a trade during this show, so far so good. No trades yet, at least from the Isles. Barring a trade during this show, do you see Parise signing an extension with the Islanders?
I kind of do.
I think it's become a little bit more prevalent that this is something's in the works, right? Parise was in the lineup today. It seems for all intents and purposes that he's a guy that the organization likes. He's a guy that I think is going to come and stick around for a very, a small contract. And you know what you're getting with Zach Parise, and if you find the right fit for him, I think it can be very successful. Now, I think what makes this a very interesting question as well. Thank you, T-Boyle, as always, for the great questions you throw into the chat every week. The interesting thing too is, what does this mean for the Oliver Wahlstrom, Matthew Barzal experiment? Do you see that being a factor into any sort of contract talks if you're Zach Parise? Because if you're sticking around, I mean, I think that's a line he's been very successful on. He's gotten the opportunity. Mm-hmm. Is that
he's been successful across the board,
right? But I think with that line, you see offensive production a lot more in the sense of you have two guys that can make those plays, and Oliver Wahlstrom, who's a known sniper now.
The only issue I have with that is it works this year fine, but if Zach Parise is still the left wing flanking Matt Barzal next season, then this summer might have ended up being a failure.
Interesting. No, that's a great point.
Like, somebody else should be on that left wing, whether it's Anders Lee because they filled a guy in somewhere else, or it's a guy that's not with the organization left. Again, whether it's a Philip Forsberg or whomever, just somebody of a higher caliber. Zach Parise still could play a great role on this team, flanking J.G. Pajot on the third line. We've seen that already. And I think we were a little more laser focused on the lack of goals from Parise this season because you had such a lack thereof from Bailey, who was supposed to score, from Palmieri, who was supposed to score. And I think if Parise had scored 3 or 4 goals in the first half and ends up with 10 to 12 by the end of the year, you're fine with that anyway, because he's playing that hard-nosed style that he has all year. He's been, mucking and grinding and all that, and he's looked great. And I think that's why a lot of Islander fans have even warmed to the thought of bringing him back. And look, the contract negotiations are going to be quick. Yeah. He's already getting his money from his buyout. He's going to get.
Do you want to come back? All right, here's your contract.
Right, and it's going to be $775K or whatever it is, $1 million if they want to round up, whatever the case may be. The guy wants to win. He hasn't won a cup yet. He wanted to play for the Islanders. He
gets with the Devils.
He gets to what looks like close out his career on the team that his father played for. So I think it's an easy decision for him. So and I think just with what we've seen from Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz, there are certain guys that they like, and I think he's one of those guys. I think that Parise will be a New York Islander next year. I do.
MJ Beckman question brewing: does maintenance day, quote unquote, mean guys like Cal Clutterbuck and Andy Green get traded? Now, I know we did address this a little bit in the show earlier. We'll just circle back. It'll be quick here. I've said that before. I think that two things can be true at the same time. I think that absolutely those guys can be in need of a maintenance day because, again, you look at their age, you look at the physical style of play that Cal Clutterbuck plays, 2 games, second game of back-to-back, 3 games in 4 nights, all that add up to maybe those guys are a little banged up and they need a little rest. At the same time, it can also be because they're banged up and they need a little bit of time, but also because there is some interest and you don't want to risk them getting even further potentially injured or whatever the case may be and mess up any sort of trade that could be in the works. So I think it's sort of both can be true.
I don't think it guarantees that they're being dealt, but it certainly means that they're on the table. That's how I interpret it. Because look, maintenance is maintenance, but it means that Lou's playing it safe, and in the event that somebody makes him that offer, he can't refuse.
Question brewing: CGS878. Is tomorrow going to be a lackluster snooze fest after all the trades that happened this month? And it seems like that's, at least from an Islanders perspective, it's going to be a little more of that. I'd recommend doing some other stuff tomorrow. Don't wait around watching TSN all day.
I think there's still some names to be dealt here tomorrow to make it overall eventful. But yes, Islander-wise, as we've been kind of saying all episode here, I wouldn't expect much. But then again, we've tended to be 100% wrong on this program before. So stay tuned, folks.
But if we're wrong, really, we can blame Brian Compton, who initially said this a couple weeks ago. And that's all the blame that goes around, really.
You are a blame shifter, so that doesn't surprise me.
Question brewing, Mike 4652 Co. Question brewing, trying to get into Lou's head. Scary, I know. What logical reason could be there for Lou not to trade some of the expiring contracts to get some assets back? Could always re-sign them in the summer.
I think that just goes to what I was talking about before, and you can call it maybe a little bit more of an out there theory if you want, but I do think that these guys' livelihoods do come somewhat into play here. where, again, if it comes down to getting a 5th or 6th round pick for Andy Green, or, let's just say Cal Clutterbuck, and you can make a good argument, of course, that he's worth more than that. But let's just say that's the best offer he gets, right? And it's like, Cal already came to Lou and he said, look, man, I'd prefer to just keep my family here from now until the summer. I'd love to stick around. If not, no hard feelings or whatever. And then Lou might just be like, you know what, Cal, don't sweat it. Best I got offered for you was a 6th anyway, so you're worth shit as it is, right? He probably wouldn't put it that way.
But Mike Milbury might. Lou Lamoriello wouldn't.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I hear you. I mean, get what you can, but there may be some special circumstances where they don't.
Right. I think too, to add on top of what Sean is saying here, when you look at what the Islanders traditionally do over the last couple of years under the Lou Lamoriello guidance as president of hockey operations and general manager, he's not a guy who's just going to make a trade for trade's sake. And I think that's what it comes down to. You add into the fact that, he's a guy that respects these players and understands that when you're making deals like this, there is more than just looking at the sort of numbers that these players bring in and the stats and the contracts and all this. There are people behind these, underneath those jerseys, and they have families and all these different aspects to it. And I think that certainly comes into play. But at the end of the day, this is a business. And I think when you look at it from just a business perspective as well, this is just a management team that has never been one to make a decision because they feel like they have to. Lou Lamoriello always loves to say, if you have time, take it. And the Islanders have had plenty of time to figure out what they're doing over the last couple months. They've had plenty of time in the last couple weeks to kind of figure out what was going on. And there's no sense of urgency to be like, all right, we have to get rid of this guy or we have to get rid of that guy. Even when you look at the Baileys or the Varleys and some of the other guys, there's no sense of urgency for the Islanders to move them now, because what's the difference now, or making that down the line, or just not re-signing certain guys? What is the value? What is the true value right now that a Clutterbuck and a Varlamov are going to bring in, or an Andy Green are going to bring into the organization right now that's necessary for them to be moved, right? I agree with you where if you're getting a couple draft picks, 4th, 5th, 6th round, what's the difference? I mean, those picks are always such a crapshoot anyway when it comes to talent and who comes out of those drafts and who doesn't. So, it comes down to, I think, just from the business perspective of just there's no need or no strong sense of urgency to be like, oh, we got to make these trades right now, because what's the difference?
Right.
And I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Question Bruin and Dremy 13. If Lou doesn't move the UFAs, is he really going to bring same team back? That's totally unacceptable.
I don't know. I don't think he does bring the same team back. I don't think him not dealing these UFAs are indicative of the path he takes over the summer. It doesn't mean that he's bringing them all back. It just might mean he didn't find a deal for some of these guys, or, again, he just accommodated them and says, listen, you can stick around for the rest of the year, and then we'll part ways when the summer comes. I think, look, it's very clear to Islander country, and I also think it's clear to management, most importantly, that this team needs some tweaks. Doesn't need an overhaul, but they definitely need to make some changes, and that obviously means getting younger overall, more specifically on the defensive end of things, and a little more offensive punch on the forward end of things. And I think at minimum, this team needs to get a top 4 left-handed defenseman and a top 6 winger. If you want to go a little further than that, maybe you get another defenseman you could put on the left side, so you're not relying on an Andy Green as your third pairing defenseman. Could he still do it? Perhaps, but maybe let's shoot a little higher. Let's give that a shot. But no, I don't think them hanging on to these UFAs for the remainder of the year means that they're not going to make any moves this summer. I expect Lou to be pretty active this summer.
Question brewing back to T. Boyle. Do you see Bellows getting traded tomorrow or during the summer?
Wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out.
So was that tomorrow or during the summer?
Well, I'm talking about tomorrow. I wouldn't rule it out. But he's like, nobody's calling up Lou Lamoriello saying, I need Kiefer Bellows for my, to fill in any hole in my roster. I feel like if Kiefer Bellows gets dealt tomorrow, I think it's in a package involving other guys. You know what I mean? Maybe something bigger. Maybe Lou surprises us and does make that deal to acquire somebody for the future tomorrow, and he includes a guy like Kiefer Bellows in that deal. But I would say the likelihood is smaller than any of the guys we're typically talking about for the deadline. I don't see him going again tomorrow unless he's part of a bigger deal.
Question brewing. I want to get to this one, then we'll circle back to some of the others. First-time commenter, P. Klein. Question brewing for you guys. Any chance we see Salo again this year, and what the heck do we do with Aho? He doesn't look great.
I think we only see Salo again this year if there's an injury.
Yes.
Or deals. If Green and Chara say farewell, then yeah, he probably
Say
comes.
la vie.
Yeah.
The phrase you were looking for.
Oh, thanks. Then I would say he comes back up. But if not, he keeps getting his playing time down in Bridgeport, and then they reassess this summer. As far as Aho goes, yeah, he's had his bumps along the way. We talked about his game today. I don't know if he's going to be a long-time answer for this team. I mean, maybe he ends up being that third pair left D if they can't, figure out a better plan. I'd like to think that they do. I mean, he's a guy who we've talked about him multiple times now over the course of the couple years you've been on the show with me, Christian, and he's always been that we'll use him if we have to kind of guy, right? Like we'll keep him around. He'll get through camp. He'll be that seventh defenseman. He'll barely get into a game. It just looks like there's no long-term plan for him to be part of the top six. So does he stick around as a utility? I think Lou finally shows mercy this summer, and he probably gets dealt or let go in some way, shape, or form unless they can't find anybody else to fill that role. And again, that means Lou had a quieter summer than he probably should have. I see Salo like everybody else. He has more potential to crack this team, again, whether that's next year or beyond. So I think the days of Sebastian Aho as a defenseman for the New York Islanders are limited.
Yeah, I think you look at that and you go, if he sticks around, he's a utility defenseman. He's a guy who gets called up to kind of fill the gap when there's an injury or something like that. I don't see him sticking around in sort of the starting role or a significant role with the Islanders organization outside of just being that guy who fills the gaps. And that's if he's still here.
I think it's gone on long enough where we can be pretty confident in saying there's no future outlook for him to be a top six defenseman on this team. I mean, prove me wrong, Sebastian, but I just don't think that's the case.
And it's funny, obviously the calls earlier in the year were sort of, why isn't Aho playing? This is crazy, this and that. And, credit where credit's due. Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello obviously saw something that a lot of fans didn't. And, myself included in the media when it came to what you were looking at as far as what the Islanders were doing. And Aho, Aho has some good moments, but he's not an everyday NHL defenseman, at least right now, the way it is. So, and as far as Salo goes, I'm in agreement with Sean. I think that he's a guy that will be here at some point in the future, but there's still a developmental phase that he's going through and sort of learning the ropes of being an everyday NHLer and an everyday pro.
Right on. And I think he's ahead of schedule. I think he surprised us this year. I think he looked better than we expected.
Question brewing back to Andremi 13. Is it possible that guys like Bailey and Varlamov are just much more valuable to the Islanders and not as much to the rest of the league?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I like
actually. And I think there's something to that where there's certain players that when they're part of a certain system, of a certain locker room, they flourish and they end up elsewhere and it just doesn't work out. I mean, how often do we see that? It happens quite a bit. So that's a decent question. And how that affects the deadline, is interesting to think. Does Josh Bailey go to another team and all of a sudden decide to start shooting the puck more? I don't think so. I mean, I think we know exactly what he is to this point. I mean, to a painful fault sometimes. But, I mean, I'm still a fan of his, despite the frustrations that he might bring to the Islander fans every now and then. But, yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think Varlamov is valuable throughout the league. I think that he's just a good goaltender. I don't think that he's going to be too much better or too much worse. I mean, unless there's just a terrible defense in front of him on another team, because that has a lot to do with it too. But I mean, Josh Bailey, who knows? Is the Islanders the best team that Josh Bailey could be on compared to the rest of the league? Maybe. I don't know. But it's a good question.
It's a really interesting question. I think that when it comes to these two particular players, especially mentioned by Andremi, I'm curious again where it stands, I guess, is what people view as the value for Bailey and Varlamov. And I know people have such a wide-eyed view of Seany and Varlamov when it comes to what you think he returns. And I've always been hesitant to say, oh, he's going to get you this massive return that I think people expect to get with him or get for him because he's so valuable. And I don't think there's a question of value for Semyon Varlamov. I think he's a talented goaltender and he could help wherever he goes. But there's also a lot of financial, I think, things that come into play. And I think that when it comes to the quality of goaltender or what your need is for a goaltender at that point, perhaps there's a cheaper option out there that's not going to cost you as much. And again, it goes back to the Islanders not feeling like they have to make a trade. So if they're not going to get the value that they see for Varlamov, then they're not going to make that deal. And the same thing goes for Josh Bailey. I'd be curious to know what people think his value would be for another team. I think that is value for him, and I think other teams recognize the value for him. But again, I think it just goes back to, is it worth the couple draft picks that you're going to get to trade him?
I think what comes down to Semyon Varlamov being traded by tomorrow is whether or not Lou Lamoriello decides that Varlamov's is the salary that needs to go in order for him to retool this team. If he says to himself, I need his $5 million out the door so that I can bring in X amount of dollars for a guy like this or a guy like that, then I think the likelihood of him getting traded tomorrow is high. But if he sees more value in him still being a tandem with Sorokin and he can find that salary elsewhere, a la a Josh Bailey, then maybe Josh Bailey gets dealt, whether that's tomorrow or over the summer. I still think that might be more of an over the summer thing. But then again, we've talked about his play. He's a playoff performer. Josh Bailey has a number of playoff games under his belt, and he's stepped up. He's been a clutch player for the Islanders in the playoffs. So he's a guy who a team could use. It's just a matter of, without, again, being in Lou Lamoriello's head, who he thinks are going to be the pieces that he wants to keep around to build on what happened the previous 2 years. If part of this retool that we're all expecting this summer. Right. And it's going to come down. We already know that he was willing to expose him in the expansion draft. So I guess he wouldn't have been too upset if he was taken instead of Jordan Eberle, right? So if he finds himself in a position where he needs to get rid of more salary in order to bring on something that's more valuable, younger, whatever the case may be, Josh Bailey could end up being that guy in that case.
Question brewing, CGS878. With how many games left in the regular season, does Corey Schneider get an NHL start? The answer is no.
The answer is, if Semyon Varlamov is still an Islander come tomorrow, he's not playing any games this season.
Yeah.
But
not on the NHL level.
He'll get in a back-to-back if Varley's dealt because, again, it doesn't matter if he starts and they lose. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's not like Lou's going to be like, oh, well, I dealt Varley. I got to bring somebody else in to finish the season out. He's just going to bring up Schneider, and when they have one of their 18 remaining back-to-backs left in the season, he'll get one of those starts. But, you know.
Say no.
We'll see. We'll see. Remains to be seen.
And finally, we're going to end it off with, we got Andremi throwing in a late question here.
I'm okay with that.
I'm going to throw that into the list. But let's get to try the A19 question brewing. What are the chances Letty comes back? I would assume during the offseason.
Well, it's funny, going back to Carver getting another mention here in the show tonight. He was saying a while back, I think that was just maybe a conversation between myself, a couple buddy of ours, or whatever it was, but he was like, don't be surprised if come trade deadline, Lou goes and gets Letty back for the playoff run. This is before the collapse, before everything went downhill. You know, when everybody...
So what was this, like October?
Well, it was very much like when, they brought in Chara and it was like, okay, they're going to need more. I mean, because back then we were still talking about...
This is like the summer.
Yeah, no, maybe the summer, maybe the summer, maybe beginning of the season.
That's training camp. When they brought in Chara, that's true.
Yeah, whatever the case may be, but basically once it was understood that they were going to need another left side puck-moving defenseman, MC was like, don't be surprised if they get Letty at the deadline, which I wouldn't have been. I mean, it'd be interesting if they swung and missed on maybe anybody else that's out there, like a Chikrin or what have you.
In the offseason next year.
No. The deadline. Like, let's say they were in the mix for a playoff spot.
Mix. Okay.
Right. If the disaster of 21-22 didn't happen.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Did you just predict another disaster?
No. Stop. You stop that. No. He basically said, don't be surprised if they look at him for the deadline this year if they were in it. They weren't in it, so it's moot point.
Gotcha.
But what are the chances of him coming back this summer? I
wouldn't rule it out.
I wouldn't rule it out if it's as a plan C thing, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like Chara. like we talked about.
More palatable.
He was Plan Z.
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like if they can't bring in maybe who they got their eyes on, I think Letty's a decent fallback. Sure.
Interesting. Very interesting insight there. So what you take away from that is I'm pretty sure I heard Sean predict a disastrous 22-23 season.
Yeah, that's how you would interpret that, Christian.
Question brewing. Well, Andrew, I guess I just making an addendum to, I guess, one of his previous questions, referring back to the value question. I just think that Lou is not a fan of retaining salary at all. Look at Ladd deal. He won't retain a penny of salary, rather attach an asset in need if need be.
I'm looking for the question in there.
There's no question. That was just, I guess, a clarifying statement.
No, I got it.
Which is fine. We are absolutely open to that.
Sure. Yeah, maybe Lou doesn't like retaining salary. I don't know. But how much does he have to retain? Because, you know, there's all the talk about you get to the deadline and most teams' salaries, well, he's got the extra year. That's the problem. It's the extra year. But, if he was just a UFA guy, it wouldn't matter.
Right.
Because you build up
That's
that
why,
space.
Yeah.
Right,
That was part of my argument earlier in the show when I said, you look at that second year, $5 million. Is that a team? If you're a team in the playoffs, that's something you want to spend money on.
Right.
A cheaper option, that kind of thing.
I'm
glad you listen when I talk.
I mean, do you blame me for not? I mean, for crying out loud. But I think that'll do it for Questions Brewing. Guys, great questions.
Yeah, good
That
stuff.
was a lot of fun. Good stuff. Hope you took some value in our answers. And we move on from...
That was Questions Brewing, brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company, Long Island's Gold Coast Brewery.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And I think this is where we wrap it all up.
That's it.
You have any closing comments that I would rather not listen to, Christian? Anything you want to add here at the end?
No, I'm good.
Oh, all right. Well, in that case, cue the music. It's time to put the cap on another episode of Hockey Night in New York. I want to thank Dave Pagnotta of the Fourth Period for joining us. Awesome stuff from him. Trade deadline excitement coming up tomorrow. I want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. Great stuff. And, of course, a big thanks to our sponsors, starting with R.J. Daniels American Bar and Grill, located at 279A Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center. The best place to catch the aisles when you can't make it to the game. Don't just go for the aisles. They have live music, comedy nights, trivia, a late-night bar scene. They have it all. Huge thanks to Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, an official partner of the New York Islanders and the greatest deli around. Check out the menu at BlueLineDeli.com for the great selections and hockey-themed heroes. And a huge thanks to Tide Technology, a voice-over IP company providing phone services for businesses across the country. Check them out at TideTechnology.com for all your telecom needs, or give them a call at 516-856-7800 and get 3 free months of service. And a huge thanks to Oyster Bay Brewing Company, located at 36 Audrey Avenue in Oyster Bay. You can order their great beers and merchandise at oysterbaybrewing.com for curbside pickup, local delivery, or shipping anywhere in New York, and get 15% off with coupon code HNINY. Once again, huge thanks to you guys for tuning in live. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, subscribe, spread the word, tell your friends to follow us on Twitch, follow us on YouTube, because we're broadcasting out there now, not live, but we're throwing the show up there, all the archives, so you can check us out on YouTube whenever you
Sean
want.
cut his own mic.
I did cut my own mic. That's pretty amazing. And, follow us on the socials. Christian, C_Arnold01. Myself, at Shawnee Hockey. Hockey Night New York, at Hockey Night NY on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. For Christian Arnold, my name is Sean Cuthbert. We've been Hockey Night New York. Have a great rest of your night. We will see you next week.
Bye.